Hi, everyone. This is Sweta Regmi streaming live from Canada. I have an amazing guest today, keynote speaker, Bobby Umar, and he's going to share everything about storytelling. And I'm super excited. Tell us where you're watching from. Do me a favor, share this because everyone needs to learn this right now. Bobby, welcome to my show. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, thanks. Happy to be here. I'm a professional speaker by trade. For the past 17 years, I've traveled around the world and done over 1,000 keynotes and workshops, mostly on leadership and soft skills. But my expertise became known as more of a authentic connection, authentic networking guy, than a personal branding person for alignment, clarity, and focus. And then the other one was just digital marketing when it comes to leveraging LinkedIn and Twitter and social audio. And now, currently, during the pandemic, I transitioned to doing more work in coaching and online programs. But my general focus is basically helping people figure out a clear personal brand for their path, then using the powers of content creation, storytelling, relationship building, mindset and confidence, public speaking, to then build a digital platforms and social audio to build a thought leadership brand for themselves. That's what I do, and that's what I love. And storytelling is a big part of it too.
Awesome. I'm so excited. I've heard you in different programs. I have heard you in TEDx as well. It's something that I respect when it comes to storytelling is truly authentic stories. So we're going to talk about today's program is going to be for everybody. There's going to be golden nuggets for everybody. So if you're a job seeker, how do you tell your story? If you're really not happy with what you're doing right now and career professional, you want to switch somewhere else, how do you probably tell the story? If you're an entrepreneur, you want to do something, you want to get some leads as well. How do you start with the storytelling as well? And if you just want to build a brand and you want to get those, speaking gig or whatever it is, how do you tell your story? So everybody, this is for you. We all need to learn it. So Bobby, let me put you on a spot. Have you ever gone through the storytelling method, the framework when you're a job seeker? Walk us through what happened. What was the do's and don'ts that you learned?
Yeah, so back in the day when I was doing storytelling as a job seeker, I was known for the guy that I was really good at interviews, right? Because when I got the interview, personality, storytelling, I would almost always get the job offer. The hard part was actually getting the interview, right? I'd send out hundreds and hundreds of resumes, but once I got an interview, I felt really confident. But typically, even back then, and we're talking 20 plus years ago, I always use the situation, action, result, or method of telling a story, right? So when they say, tell us about an obstacle you face, well, here's the situation, here's the action I took, here was the result, and I talk about that. Tell us about a time where you navigated something else, and so then I had that whole situation, action, result piece. So that framework would always help me explain it to them in a way that they could understand. And also being a really good storyteller and getting them immersed. One of the things that happens in interviews, whether it's one person or even a panel of 5 people, you start to see people smiling, you see the eye contact, you see the heads nodding, okay, yeah, this is working. Okay, I'm working. I'm all right. And then I start to see, and then sometimes with some stories, if you really look at the eye contact and you look at the body language, you can go a little bit further. You can dig a little bit deeper. You can start talking about the emotions a little bit more. You can start even asking questions like, hey, I'm sure many of you have felt this way before, right? Yeah. So, and then I keep going. And even just those subtle questions that I ask to keep them invested in what I'm talking about go a long way.
I really like that. Um, what do you think the body language is when it comes to storytelling? Let's say you're a job seeker, you're sitting down an interview. Let's go deeper. Okay, so you're saying your story, STAR method. So body language, how do you pick up the vibe? Like, how do you think that people are going to portray you? Like, what are the do's and don'ts when it comes to storytelling, especially when you are going with the body language?
Well, I mean, body language takes time to understand, but I think you do a little bit of research and study on it, you'll actually understand how it works. But I think it generally starts with the eyes. I think are really telling in terms of, their eyes might pop up or their eyes might move, and how they, see you and look at you. Are looking at you, a smile on their face, or their grimace, or whatever it might be. If you tell something really harsh, like, ooh, like they might do that. And then the other one, of course, is really their posture. Like, are they leaning in to hear a story? What are they doing? Those types of things will, help me understand a little bit more about, and of course the bad ones, like they're looking at their watch. Are we done yet? Is he talking too long? Like, that's a classic. But I mean, learning to tell body language, I think, goes a long way. Now, you mentioned about do's and don'ts. Well, I mean, a don't would be to, don't assume. I mean, certainly you can try to go in a different angle or try to dive deeper into your topic or whatever you're talking about, your story. But you can't assume. But I think that with a little bit of finesse and experience, having done lots of interviews, you start to see there's certain patterns that emerge when it comes to reading body language, as it were. And at the same time, different people have different body language types, and don't assume the worst. Like if someone, for example, shifts, like, okay, let me just shift here, and they're doing this. That may not mean anything. Maybe they're just uncomfortable and they have like a bug in their back. You have no idea. I know a lot of people, they start to assume something, or they look down, they're making notes. Did he write something bad about me? Is she not like me? I mean, there's certain things that you shouldn't really make huge assumptions on, because you have no idea why they're doing that.
I love it. So do not assume it. And I'd like to add that as well, especially you said eye contact as well, right? From the different background we come from, the cultural background, where not having the eye contact is something that we are not trained in how to look, where to look. And culturally as well, we're not supposed to look at someone in eyes, especially elders and everything. And when you come from that culture, when managers are actually, interviewing it, they're automatically in North America. The person is not confident. The person is probably lying, right? And I had that situation as well, because now as a newcomer, I am not looking at them in eyes, because culturally, I was never trained and I was not supposed to look people in eyes. And then later on, when I became a hire manager, I noticed a lot of it in newcomers in Canada. What is it? How do you, what's a right way to look in someone's eyes? Like for those people who are not used to it, can you give us some tips on it when you're doing the storytelling?
Yeah, I think looking at people's eyes is actually pretty hard. I mean, I'm a very big, deep heart connector, and so I'm really big on looking at people's eyes. But I know that sometimes I look at their eyes and they're uncomfortable, right? So they look aware, they look down, and so part of it's about reading your audience. Sometimes people don't like that, but I think it's always good to start with eye contact. It's always good to every once in a while look at the eyes, but you can also tell whether they're into it or they're not into it. I mean, that's something that is something to keep in mind. When there's just one person, you look in their eyes is a great way to, again, show that you care about what they have to say. I particularly like to look in people's eyes when I'm listening to them answer a question, right? So when I'm speaking necessarily, I don't have to always look at their eye. I don't have to look at your eyes while I'm talking to you all the time. I can still say, it's great, and and then I can look around, and that's totally fine. But when they're telling me their story and I'm listening to them, no matter what side of the table you are, that's when I'm definitely looking at their eyes, because from their eyes and their face contact, I'm able to see kind of their expression. So I think for me, that's something to keep in mind. And, is there a proper way to look at people's eyes? I mean, generally speaking, as long as you're looking at their face and you're showing that you're interested and you're leaning into the conversation, I think that's all you have to do. You don't have to always look into their eyes, because I know some people, again, don't like that.
Okay, perfect. So right now, like example is I'm looking at Bobby when I'm looking at like, I'm not like I'm looking at Bobby because I want to listen to him. And then I'm looking at the camera right now when I'm talking. So it could be there's probably technique when it comes to, virtually interviewing or virtually networking or something like that, right? So do you have any tips for those people when they're talking or networking, because you're huge on networking? Any tips that works digitally right now for those people?
In terms of networking,
In terms of networking and like, putting a body language together, what are the do's and don'ts? And we can move on to the different section.
gosh, there's so many different things when it comes to networking online. But the most powerful thing you have when it comes to networking online is preparation. Because when you're live and in person, you have to kind of be there and you're on the spot. And so people like myself are extroverts. We thrive, but a lot of introverts don't thrive. And the power of digital is the power for you to prepare. You can prepare your video, you can prepare your copy, you can prepare your tweet, you can prepare your post. You can have notes, like you can put a note in front of you, in front of the camera while you're talking to people, and there it is, and no one sees the note, but here I'm referring to those notes, and that's totally fine. So when you're doing an interview, for example, I can refer to notes that I have, and that's totally fine too. So I think there's a lot of, to me, the big advantage of digital is to use that for preparation, prepare what you're trying to do when it comes to digitally putting yourself out there, whether you're doing interviews or whether you're putting content out there or even putting up your resume or your LinkedIn profile.
Awesome. All right. So let's move on from the body language to, how do you talk in an interview, to now let's talk about how do you build a brand with the storytelling? Do you have any do's and don'ts on it?
Do's and don'ts the do for personal branding is to start and invest in personal branding. I've been working on personal branding with people for 15 years. And what I can tell you is that people, there's three aspects of personal brand. There's discover your personal brand, where you dive deep in who you are, understand your feedback network, and you look at your values, your principles, your passions, your interests, skills, things like that, and you carve that brand. Then there's the design your personal brand. Now we're looking at our assets, our marketing materials, and putting together the plans, the strategies, the tactics, and then you deliver your personal brand. Now it's out there, and you're monitoring the results, you're engaging people, getting feedback, and then re-evolving your brand. And what I can tell you is that most of us are always designing our brand. We're planning the strategy, the tactics, the assets, the marketing materials, the resumes, the LinkedIn profiles, all that kind of stuff. But we don't do the deep dive work. And so for me, the biggest do is to do that, and the biggest don't is don't avoid that. A lot of people don't want to do that, and they don't want to take the time because it's a lot of time. But we spend 10, 20 hours on our resume. I think you can spend 20, 30 hours on your personal brand, because once you have it nailed, and it's based on your own knowledge, the knowledge of others, and online assessments, you now have something that's extremely clear, focused, on purpose, directional, and you will then be able to use that for your career growth strategy, for your content strategy, for your business development strategy, whatever you want to do. But that branding thing is so, so important. A lot of people don't do that. And I always try to, because you can do it on your own, and maybe you have a mentor, maybe you have a coach, and that's fine. But you're probably going to do maybe 50, 60% aligned. But if you do the really deep dive work and it's all validated, then you have that 80, 90, 95% alignment. That's when the real magic happens, especially for a job search. Because you're like, I've been looking for a job for a year and a half and I'm not getting any results. Well, probably because you're not really clear on your brand and your target. And then once you have that clear brand, then the second piece is, what's your strategy now? What's your strategy to get out there? And so what I tell people, whether you're a job career searcher or even if you're a business or a brand, is you have to figure out some sort of growth strategy, right? What's your objective? If your objective is to get a job, is your objective to generate leads? Is your objective to build such a huge thought leadership brand that you get speaking and media opportunities? Well, you have to come up with the right strategy. So number one, choose your platform. Number two, know who your target audience is and where are they? And number three, put a strategy that works towards that. And content is a huge, huge driver of opportunity, because content creates conversations. Those conversations lead to connections. Connections lead to a community, and that's when you change and you leverage them to change your path and where you're trying to go. So I think a lot of people don't leverage that, but to me, content, whether you're creating content or commenting on people's posts or replying to their tweets or their Instagram posts, that's where the magic is. Just show who you are, what you're all about, what your expertise is, and to make an impression on people. And it doesn't matter how old you are or how young you are. You could do this very significantly, even in a matter of months, to build consistency and confidence around what you're doing.
Awesome. And I see, 5 times TEDx speaker. It's not a joke, right? Can you walk us through how did you get there? What were the things that that really worked for you and you'd like to share with the audience for those who probably want to go there one day? Maybe that's a long-term vision for them. Can you walk us through that work for you?
Yeah, in fact, I just did a seminar a couple nights ago. It was sponsored by the Medici community, and they brought me in to do a free seminar, and I basically talked about how to land a TEDx talk. So a couple of things that I can share from that. Number one, the first 4 TEDx talks I got were basically because of 2 things. One, because I built relationships with people that were doers and making stuff happen, right? And number 2, because I had a large thought leadership brand already. People knew who I was. They knew what I was talking about. And so they reached out to me and said, hey, come speak at my event. And so the first 4, that's exactly what I did. When it came to the 5th TEDx talk, and of course, I also rejected 3 other ones too, because I don't think they had the proper branding and preparation. So I was like, I don't want to associate myself with that one. And I learned my lesson from the couple of them that weren't very organized. So for the 5th one, again, the key to getting a TEDx talk is having a clear idea, one that aligns with the TEDx culture and what the organizers want, and really taking key moments from the story of your life and extracting the right ideas and the right stories and coming up with the right title. Most people don't know how to do that. Most people have an idea. Like at the seminar the other night, I asked, okay, what's your big TED Talk idea? And everyone started listing all these ideas. And I would say 80% of them are like, these are never going to work because they were too vague. They were already done. They were too salesy. They weren't really something that was going to appeal to TEDx organizers. And so, it's important to have a really, really awesome title, really look at your entire story and extract those key elements of your life. And the other thing is not to do it too much. Like, people want to talk about everything, but it's like, you know what, you have 18 minutes. What's your one big idea? What's the 1 or 2 stories that extrapolate to this idea? I think that's going to be an interesting piece. And also, I might let people know that if they're interested, I'm actually doing a workshop on TEDx, crafting the right title, going through your entire story, and workshopping with just 8 people. And we actually on the session of the night, we actually had a special offer, which actually ends today at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. So if anyone's interested, just DM me and I can send you the link. You can check it out and see if you're interested.
Awesome. It was I was part of that as well. I attended it. Just I was there as well, and it was really good. I really like some framework on it. So I'm going to put you on a spot.
Love it.
What were the stories that you felt like it would work? Can you give us some example, the hookup line for those people who are watching right now who are working on it? What's the storyline, for example, that would potentially work?
What do you mean by storyline? You mean for TEDx or just in general?
For TEDx, yeah. Let's move on to TEDx now. This is going to be TEDx now.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. So, I mean, the thing is, there's a lot of TED ideas out there. So I think the one thing you have to think about is what's something really unique from your life, because that's the thing that sets you apart. Your point of difference is your life story. So things from your life story will set you apart. Now, what does that unique take on that thing that will also set you apart? Because oftentimes, one way to kind of break through the clutter is to come up with something that's more, something of the cognitive dissonance or something that's like, okay, that's not what I thought. So for example, when I did my 4th TEDx talk, I talked about, if you want to do well in school, you need to fail. And they're like, well, what? Why would I want to fail in school? I don't get it. And obviously I don't want people to fail in school, but it was a way to catch their attention, to say, okay, what does he mean? And that cognitive dissonance got people's attention as I did the TED Talk. So, I think that, your initial TED Talk has to be so simple enough that you can explain it in 1 or 2 lines, right? Or less than a paragraph, but something short and sweet so people really get it, right? And I think that to me is a big piece. And oftentimes it can be framed in the form of a question, right? Here's a question, because, you want people to think about, it's about spreading ideas. So frame it in the form of a question. So, for example, one of my TED Talk ideas I haven't done yet, but I've had it for years, which is, when you're a kid who grew up in let's say with immigrant parents, and there's a culture gap between your values and their values, right? Do people feel that way? Okay, that's my TED Talk idea. Now, share that in the form of a question. Now I'll share it in the form of a statement. Okay. When you grow up in an immigrant household, your parents raise you with their values, which is like this circle. And then you grow up and you go to kindergarten, university, high school, university, and you start to develop your own values. And these circles, they intersect. And there are certain parts of your values that are aligned, right? Maybe you have similar values, but there's other ones that are different. And what happens is that you feel guilty and you try to live to your parents' values that don't fit with your own because you feel guilty. And parents feel that when kids are exercising their own values, they feel like they're rejecting their values. And so for me, that culture, that values gap becomes a values trap. And so I think parents and kids need to have conversations to understand what they have in common and what they don't have in common so they can learn to respect each other and avoid that trap.
That's really good. And I bet so many people can relate to it. Can you type in one for those of you watching right now? Type in one if you can totally resonate with what Bobby just said. As an immigrant, there's a cultural clash between your own, parents. I can so relate it. So now let's move. I know that you do the leadership coaching as well. So someone as a leader who wanted to just build a brand, not looking for a job, and they want to go into that, right? Be a speaker. What would be something that some of the title that might work for them? So to inspire, motivate, what is the thing that it might work for them? Storytelling.
In terms of speaking, it's very similar to the TEDx stuff, right? I mean, the difference is that the audience is shifted now. So now you're looking at, say, for example, a business or a conference, someone hires you. So if they want to hire you, what's that headline and what's that subtitle of your talk that's going to benefit them? They want to know right away from your talk and the description, why should I bring you in? Why is this going to matter to my audience? Why is it going to matter to my company to bring you in? And I think that to me is going to be an important piece. And when it comes to story, typically when you create a presentation, oftentimes you'll start with a story to relate to the audience and get them to understand exactly that you understand where they're coming from and what you're going to talk about is going to get their attention. A lot of people ask me, when should I put a story into my presentation? Well, I always start with one, but you can do it later. But to me, starting with the story really sets yourself apart to connect with the audience, to create some sort of resonant and human connection with them. And then if you're vulnerable, even better, because then they're more likely to be vulnerable when you talk about their challenges.
I love that because I've seen, is that the strategy people put it through? Because I didn't even know that I was doing it because I always start with the story whenever I'm invited with the webinar and everything. What would be your story if you're invited on certain type of webinar, leadership webinar, what would be your story that you've been starting, or what would be your story to start with?
Well, I think again, I have a story for everything. So one of the things I've done is I have a database of all the stories I've told. And there's some stories I've told 500 times because I've done multiple keynotes like on networking or personal branding. And there's other stories I keep adding new stories. And in fact, I started doing a project on Facebook and LinkedIn where I started telling stories from when I was a kid or when I was young, because I'm starting to lose my memory. So I want to make sure I have these captured in a database. But to me, I have a database of all these stories that I've done. So, for leadership, for example, the best story I can tell people is feeling lost, stuck, or unfulfilled on my journey, right? I've had 4 different careers. I've finally found my path through personal branding, and now I've never looked back. So telling that story, because tons of people out there have felt lost in their career or stuck in their job or unfulfilled with their projects or businesses or career. And so by telling my journey, people totally get it. And it's a way for me to also tell them the importance about personal branding.
I love it. So you have a database. So for those of you right now, if you want to write it down, you got to have a database of stories.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm going to probably take that on because I tell many stories, but I don't have a database. It's just here, not written down.
Well, yeah. And no, I'm the same way. I still have hundreds of stories in here. And one of the things I do, I do a storytelling workshop too. And one of the things I tell them, I say, okay, I want my storytelling workshop is designed to craft one amazing story for you, like a 3-minute video story of your life, which is great. But I tell people you should be able to get at least 30 stories, 10 from your own personal life, 10 from your work life, and 10 stories of people that you admire or respect or have engaged with that you want to tell the story. And 30 stories is the beginning. Every single person has hundreds of stories that you can extract. And people are like, oh, but who am I? What do I have? You have no idea. If you tell me the story about why your mom is amazing, that's a story. If you tell me the story about what it was like when you first left the house and went off on your own to college or a job, whatever, What'd that feel like? What'd you learn? I mean, that's a story. There's so many stories in our life. Our lives are so rich, but people don't take the time to really extract those stories and have them honed and put down on paper.
That's amazing. I really like that fact. You said 10 your personal, 10 someone else, and 10 with your experience. Beautiful. I love it. So who wants to see Bobby back again? Type in, if you're watching on a replay later on, type in to bring Bobby back, and maybe we can put him on the spot. Hey, tell us your story. Walk us through the presentations. Now, for Bobby, I think if people, we're going to wrap this up in 3 minutes. And I have the website for you. This is a website for you, right?
That's one of my websites, but that's the main website for speaking and training. Yes, thank you.
Okay, so anyone wants to reach out to Bobby for anything at all when it comes to speaking, and then training, and what else? What else can people reach out to you for?
Well, I mean, for the most part, speaking and training is the main thing I do, whether it's helping people with personal branding, networking, or leveraging LinkedIn and Twitter and social audio like Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces. But, from a coaching perspective, I also work with people. I'm running the TEDx coaching program right now. That's actually, again, it's the expiry date of the special offers ends tonight, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. So just DM me. But I'm also doing stuff on personal branding for people. I'm also helping people with, transition or ramping up their business and brand. But also just building a digital presence on LinkedIn and Twitter to build a thought leadership brand. Because when you build a thought leadership brand, that leads to tons of opportunities, whether you're looking for a job, generate leads, get speaking and media opportunities. But the idea of building a thought leadership brand is about getting such a huge brand out there that people know who you are, that they'll reach out to you. And I think that there's tons of awesome opportunities to influence credibility and reach.
Absolutely. One thing that I wanted to take time. I mean, I did not know Bobby. I've seen him everywhere, pretty much. So Twitter, I think on LinkedIn all the time. We had a lot of mutual connections, and I'm like, who is this guy? So the funny thing is, I looked at him, and then we happened to bump in one of the audio sessions on LinkedIn, and I was like, okay, I kept on following him, and I really liked his vibe, the branding perspective. I really liked it. It was very authentic. And then he invited me on Twitter Space to talk about it, and I really felt like, oh my God, this is. I want to have him on my show, and I made it.
And you were great. You were great, by the way. That was awesome. Like, it was so good. You were so good. I was so happy.
Thank you. It's what. I think credit goes to you, because sometimes what happens is when you invite people and when you don't ask the right question, it's going to be very hard. And I think full credit goes to you for letting me tell my stories on Twitter Space, and we should do that more often. But I'd like to thank you so much for coming in today, because I know that you're busy. You're a keynote speaker. And when I asked you, Bobby, do you want to hop in? You're like, yeah, let's do it. I was like, oh my God, let's do this. So thank you so much. And before we leave, is there any last one thing that you want to leave it for people who are watching right now who wanted to go and be a keynote speaker? What's number one strategy that everyone should work right now from today, right now?
The number one strategy is if you dive into your own personal story and understand your own personal brand, you'll be able to express that story and that brand in a way that resonates and creates opportunity. Because at the end of the day, people hire those that they trust. And your story and your storytelling is going to build that trust the most effectively and the quickest way possible.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And this is available for replay. Type in replay when you go watch it. It's on LinkedIn. And any takeaways that you've learned, go ahead and share this everywhere. This has been streaming on YouTube as well. Go ahead and subscribe to our channel. It's right there. And that being said, thank you so much, everyone, for watching us. And we would love the feedback. What should we bring in next time? DM Bobby as well. He's super active, and I know he's going to reply back to you. Thank you so much, Bobby.
Thanks, I appreciate it.